Dr. Viranna, you're the new constituency head of the DA Ugu South. You're a young man. How did it happen that a young man like you landed up in politics?
Well, it started quite early. My family has always been involved in politics, but through the ANC. But during the time that I went to university and started working, and then you see that the systems that are in place aren't what we fought for in the struggle up to 1994. And reading through different policies, the DA was the closest that has the future of South Africa in mind. And that's why I got into politics, was to make a difference, especially in the field I'm in as a medical doctor, because I've worked in public hospitals. I've seen the infrastructure and the systems literally crumbling. And people don't listen to you from the bottom. That's one of the problems we have at the moment. You can only effect change when you're in the legislature, in the top structures. So I went into politics to try change the system in order to improving it for all communities.
Did you ever practice as a medical doctor?
Yes, I did. I practiced for 5 years, from being a medical student at the University of Pretoria. I did my internship here in Durban at Addington Mahatma Gandhi Hospital, and I did my community service in Kimberley.
And now you're a full-time politician?
Yes, I'm a full-time politician. Unfortunately, the DAA does say that being an MPL is a full-time job because you're there to serve your community. So this is just a different method of service.
Okay, you've been through a very, very interesting period now, new leader of the DA.
Yes.
And new policy changes, I suppose, in the future. Tell us about the changeover.
Well, the DA and South Africa at the moment is going through a very exciting period. In PE, 2 weeks ago, we elected Musi Maimane as our new federal leader. We also adopted our new values charter, and policies, which are based on 3 firm values that the DA supports and the DA wants to see fulfilled in South Africa. Those are the values of freedom, fairness, and opportunities for all. So it's based on our liberal background as the DA, but it's values that are shared with many South Africans who want to see the country moving forward instead of just dwelling in the legacy of the past.
Okay, now, you've just mentioned this now. How does it differ from what it used to be before?
In major terms, it doesn't differ from our open opportunity society for all. But we've done our research and our polling with the electorate, and they said that they didn't really understand what the open opportunity society for all actually meant in their lives. So we put it into values that can be shared with all South Africans, regardless of race, regardless of class, regardless of where they stay. It's values that are common to us as South Africans, and it's easier to share values with a political party or a person than it is to share policy. Policies tend to be complicated, while values are something that's easily understandable. It creates an emotional bond between people, and it can go into forming our policies. So it wasn't a major shift in terms of our policies have suddenly changed. It's just that we put it in a way that's more easily understandable to the majority of the electorate and the majority of South Africans.
Dr. Viranna, a very interesting aspect of the DA has always been that the spectrum of its supporters varied from the classic liberal right through to the more conservative voter. And some of them quite conservative. And they were voting DA because of their anti-ANC feelings. Now, is this not going to be a problem in future, relating to what you've just said? the new emphasis on the policies you've mentioned?
Well, in actual fact, I don't think it will. Our policies at a foundational level hasn't moved away from our liberal background that the Democratic Alliance has always stood for, even back to the PFP days. We've always said we're a liberal party. Yes, we do get support from conservative elements, but South Africa is a changing society. South Africa is a society that wants to move forward, not move backwards. So we want people to support our policies in creating a greater South Africa, a brighter South Africa, one filled with opportunities for all. So I do not think that this will have a major impact on our support base, because we are a party now of shared values. And if you share our values, you want to see South Africa growing and South Africa being better.
Why I ask is because if my information is correct, or if I understood it correctly, why I ask is because at one stage Musi Maimane said that he was against the death penalty. And then at another stage, I think in a Twitter conversation or in an interview, he said he was in favor of a referendum on the death penalty. Now, how do these two opinions reconcile?
Okay, the D is we always have a party that says individuals can have their own personal views, but we are a country and a party that's based on the Constitution of South Africa. And the South African Constitution quite firmly states that the right to life is paramount in so far as the death penalty is concerned. So there are many people in the country who would want to have the death penalty back, and they're entitled to those views, but they can only be views, because the Constitution, which is the ultimate law of the country, states that the death penalty cannot be in South Africa at the moment. So we are a party that has people with differing views, but the policy of the Democratic Alliance itself, besides what Musi Maimane has said, the party's policy has always been that we are against the death penalty.
Okay, what if the DA becomes the government, holds a referendum, 85% of the people say they're in favor? What will happen then?
Well, the Constitution is the highest law in the land. And while a referendum could be called, in terms of the Constitution, it will be a non-binding referendum.
Yeah, but if you have a majority, two-thirds majority, you can change the Constitution.
Yes, but our policies are quite firm on this. The DA does not support the death penalty coming back to the country. So even if we had a two-thirds majority, this is one policy that's very firm for us, that we do not support the death penalty.
Okay, now let's touch on something else, on land ownership. Yes. I believe there's been a shift too. For instance, the traditional leaders, you guys say that there should be a change, in other words, that they can own the land that they live on.
Yes.
I'm simplifying, but if you can just enlighten us.
Yes, no, that's a very firm policy that we came out at our Federal Congress. We feel that land is one of the most vital elements of capital that a person has. To own the land that they stay on gives them capital to either go to the bank and get a loan, or use the property that they have to better themselves and to create opportunities for themselves and for their families. But unfortunately, at the moment in South Africa, there's thousands of acres of land that are either under communal property rights, or it is under state ownership, or it's under municipal ownership. Yet there are people, sometimes very poor people, living on that land and have been living on that land for ages. So our policy is quite firm that the land that people stay on, those residents should be given tenure, they should be given title deeds, they should be able to use that property which they own as collateral to the betterment of themselves. We are not against the concept of traditional leadership. They play a vital part in the cultural aspects in many communities in KwaZulu-Natal and in South Africa. But we say the ownership of land is tantamount to a person's dignity and tantamount to a person's pride. So people should own the land they live on, especially if it's in rural areas, in urban areas, state land, that the residents should be given tenure so that they can use this asset, this dead capital as it is at the moment, as usable capital to better their lives.
Dr. Viranna, there are many other things that we can talk about, but let's take only one finally, and that is the electoral system. There's also been, I mean, you guys are quite adamant about what you would want it to be. Just expand on that.
At the moment in South Africa, nationally and provincially, we have what is called a proportional representation system. While it works very well in giving everyone and all political parties a voice to have their say in Parliament, one of its drawbacks is that the politicians that are elected to these bodies, Parliament, the provincial legislature, are accountable to their party and not necessarily to the people on the ground who voted them in. Policy, what we want is to have MPs, MPLs to be elected from constituencies on the ground. So there will be, our policy states we want 300 constituencies spread across South Africa, and another 100 of those MPs to become from the proportional representation side, so that smaller parties, smaller groups will still have their say in Parliament. So we feel it's the best of both worlds. There's accountability, as you can hold your constituency MP or MPL to account. And if you do support a smaller political party, they will still have their seats in the legislatures to represent people who voted for them as well.
Yeah, and it's basically the Van Zyl-Slabbert report
Yes.
of many years ago.
Yes.
So instead of a candidate being forced onto a group of people, the candidate comes from their ranks.
Yes, it's directly, our policy comes directly from the Van Zyl-Slabbert report. It's been sitting on the desk of the Minister of Kokta, local government in Cape Town, for a long time. It's been widely published through the IEC that this report has come out, but nothing has been...
It's more than 10 years.
It's almost 20 years now.
20 years now.
Dr. Van Zyl-Slabbert,
Yes,
I think,
yes.
published the report in 1996 after the 94 elections. But ever since then, there has been no action taken on his report. And our policy now would be that when we are in government, we want a system as set out in the Van Zyl-Slabbert report, in order to, firstly, people can hold their politicians to account, and secondly, the voices of smaller parties and minority groups will still be represented in Parliament.
Dr. Viranna, thank you very much. It's been most interesting.
Thank you.
We would have liked to speak more, but otherwise it'll get too long. And everything of the best to you and your party.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.